Good evening, dear friends. Let's take a deep breath together. Breathe in. Peace, breathe out. Resistance, breathe in. Love, breathe out. Pain, today, we explore something tender and transformative. The act of letting go with love, the art of releasing those who no longer value us, not with anger, but with grace, not with vengeance, but with compassion. When we talk about letting go of those who no longer value us, we must begin with an honest inquiry. Do we truly value ourselves? Because often, the external treatment we accept is simply a reflection of the internal standards we hold. Self-worth is not a concept you measure with someone else's yardstick. It's not based on what you achieve, how others treat you, how many people like you, or who chooses to stay in your life. It is something intrinsic, unchangeable, whole, and unshaken by external events. You were born with it. It does not increase when someone approves of you, and it does not diminish when someone walks away. And yet, so many of us fall into the pattern of bargaining with our worth. We contort ourselves to be liked, to be chosen, to be seen as enough. We confuse being needed with being valued. We tolerate neglect, disrespect, even emotional abandonment, hoping that if we stay long enough, love will finally arrive. But let's be very clear, love that must be earned by self-betrayal is not love. It's a transaction dressed up in emotional codependency. When you find yourself constantly proving, explaining, or overextending just to be tolerated by someone, it's not a relationship, it's a performance. And in the process, you become an understudy in your own life. Psychologically, we tend to recreate familiar patterns. If we were taught directly or subtly that we are only lovable when we're useful, when we're pleasing, or when we're quiet, then we often seek out relationships that mirror those early dynamics. It's not conscious, it's the nervous system trying to find home, even if that home is unhealthy. But just because a pattern is familiar doesn't mean it's right. To shift this, we must reconnect with our inherent worth, not in an abstract feel, good kind of way, but in a grounded, intentional practice. Begin by observing how you speak to yourself. Would you talk to a child the way you talk to your own heart? Would you dismiss your best friend's pain the way you sometimes dismiss your own? Healing begins in those micro moments of self-awareness. And I want to say something here that might be difficult to hear but essential. When someone repeatedly shows you that they do not value you, through disregard, dishonesty, or consistent absence, it is not your job to change their perspective. It is your job to honor your truth. Your energy is sacred. Pouring it into a vessel with no bottom does not make you generous. It makes you depleted. This is not about arrogance or superiority. This is about alignment. You are not better than anyone, but you are also not beneath anyone. And when you understand this deeply, you stop chasing validation from people who are not capable of offering it. You stop confusing scarcity with destiny. Philosophically, we can look at this through the lens of existential freedom. As the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said, "Once you label me, you negate me. When you base your worth on how others define you, you become a prisoner of their limited understanding. But when you choose to define yourself, not from ego, but from essence, you reclaim your freedom. You no longer wait for permission to feel loved. You give it to yourself freely. You begin to attract relationships that meet you at that frequency, authentic, mutual, nourishing. And so I say this to you not just as a speaker, but as someone who has lived through this lesson. Your worth is not up for debate, not with anyone, not even with yourself. You are allowed to walk away from what wounds you, not because you hate the other person, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop participating in your own harm. Let that truth settle deep in your heart. You don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You already are. Once we begin to understand our worth, not as something we earn, but as something we remember, we naturally arrive at the doorway of self-love. And I want to clarify something here. Self-love is not the same as self-indulgence or selfishness. It is not an ego trip. It is the most honest, sustaining relationship you will ever have with yourself. When we talk about loving ourselves, we are really talking about the foundation upon which all other relationships are built, because how we love ourselves sets the tone for how we allow others to love us. If we love ourselves conditionally only when we're successful, attractive, productive, or perfect, then we tend to tolerate that same conditional treatment from the people around us. But self-love, real self-love, is not based on performance. It's based on presence. It says, I am worthy of compassion even when I fall short. I am deserving of care even when I am messy or uncertain. That kind of self-love doesn't inflate your ego. It stabilizes your sense of self. Let's bring this down into our lived experience. Think for a moment. How many decisions in your life have been made from a place of fear? Fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. And how many times have you ignored your own needs in order to keep someone else comfortable? We do this because we confuse love with sacrifice. We are taught that to love is to give endlessly, even when it costs us our peace. But what we're rarely taught is that loving yourself means not abandoning yourself for someone else's comfort. Self-love creates boundaries, not walls, but clear lines that say, this is how I treat myself, and I expect to be met with the same care. These boundaries are not about punishment, they are about protection of your peace, your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. Psychologically speaking, when we love ourselves, we regulate our nervous system. We soothe the parts of us that feel unsafe, unseen, or unloved. And over time, we stop seeking rescue from the outside because we've become our own safe haven. That doesn't mean we don't need others. We're social beings wired for connection. But it means we don't rely on others to fill a void that only our own love can heal. And here's something profound to consider. When you practice self-love, the people who cannot meet you at that level of respect often begin to fade from your life. Not because you forced them out, but because your frequency has changed. You no longer vibrate with the energy of desperation or unworthiness. And that shift, while sometimes painful, opens the door to relationships that are based not on need, but on choice. Philosophically, this is about sovereignty, about claiming your right to be whole, regardless of who affirms it. The Stoics spoke of inner citadels, fortresses of the mind and spirit that could not be broken by external chaos. Self-love is your citadel. It is not loud, it is not boastful, but it is unshakable. Louise Hay often said, "You have been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." And that's really the invitation here, to stop waiting for someone else to make you feel loved, and to begin offering that love to yourself in small, daily ways, through your thoughts, your choices, your inner dialogue. Because the moment you begin treating yourself as valuable, your entire life begins to reorganize around that truth. You walk differently, you speak differently, you no longer beg for crumbs, you know you deserve the feast. And so I leave you with this thought: when you become the source of your own love, you stop needing people to prove your worth and start choosing people who already see it. Once we begin to practice self-love, not as an abstract concept, but as a daily commitment, we naturally become more attuned to what is aligned with that love and what isn't. And this brings us to a truth that many of us find difficult to accept. Sometimes the people we care about most are no longer meant to walk beside us. Not because they are bad and not because we are unlovable, but because the path we're growing into no longer matches the one they are choosing. Relationships, like people, evolve. Some grow with us, others don't. And one of the most compassionate things we can do is to tell the truth about where alignment has been lost. Now, alignment isn't about agreement on every issue or constant harmony. That's fantasy. True alignment is about values, about mutual respect, about emotional safety. It's about asking, can I show up fully in this space and still be honored for who I am? Can I express my needs without guilt? Can I be vulnerable without fear of being weaponized? When the answer becomes no too many times, it's often not a matter of effort. It's a matter of misalignment. Psychologically, we tend to delay this recognition because misalignment is uncomfortable. We cling to potential. We remember the good times. We hope things will return to the way they were, but this nostalgia can become a trap. It tricks us into tolerating the present out of loyalty to the past. And yet, the most honest relationships are not rooted in the past. They are rooted in the now, and the now tells you everything you need to know if you're willing to listen. If you constantly feel small, unsafe, or unseen in someone's presence, that is data. If you have to shrink your joy or dilute your pain to maintain peace, that is data. If you find yourself drained, anxious, or uncertain after every interaction, that is data. Misalignment doesn't mean you've failed. It simply means your growth has taken you in a different direction. And the deeper your relationship with yourself becomes, the clearer this dissonance feels. Spiritually, this is part of our evolution. We come into this life with sacred contracts, relationships meant to teach us, challenge us, sometimes even break us open so that we may return to wholeness. But not all contracts are lifelong. Some are designed to end. And when we fight that ending, we suffer not because of the loss, but because of our resistance to it. Louise Hay often spoke about releasing with love, about blessing the lesson and the person, and choosing to move forward with peace. That's what recognizing misalignment is really about. It's not a judgment, it's an act of self-trust. You are simply honoring that your spirit is asking for a different kind of nourishment. And this is where courage comes in. Because walking away from something familiar, even when it's no longer fulfilling, is still difficult. Our brains are wired for the known. Even pain can feel safer than the unknown. But I promise you, what is on the other side of misalignment is not emptiness. It is clarity. It is energy returned. It is the space to call in what is aligned with your growth, your joy, and your becoming. So if you are in a relationship that consistently costs you your peace, if you are pouring love into a container that no longer holds you, ask yourself, is this still serving who I am now? Or am I staying for the memory of who I once was? Because the truth is, when something no longer fits the shape of your soul, it's not betrayal to let it go, it's wisdom. There comes a moment, once we've acknowledged misalignment, where we face the actual act of letting go. And this, for many, is the most emotionally complex step, not because we don't see the truth, but because we fear what letting go will mean about us, about them, about the story we've carried for so long. Letting go is often mistaken for rejection, or worse, for failure. But in truth, letting go is one of the most loving acts you can offer, both to yourself and to the other person. It says, I honor who we were, I accept who we are now, and I release what no longer serves either of us. This process becomes painful when we confuse release with resentment, when we attach blame in order to justify our decision. But bitterness is a weight. It doesn't protect you. It keeps you entangled in the very energy you're trying to heal from. When you walk away from someone who no longer values you, you are not declaring them evil or broken. You are simply affirming that your heart deserves to be seen, respected, and held with care, and you can make that declaration without hostility. You don't need to prove someone wrong in order to walk your own path right. Psychologically, we know that unresolved anger binds us. Neuroscience shows us that rumination, turning over perceived wrongs in our minds, activates the same stress circuits as physical pain. When we stay angry, we stay activated. We stay connected, but through a wound. And while anger may feel momentarily empowering, it is not sustainable. It doesn't soothe, it doesn't restore, it burns through our inner peace and leaves us hollow. Philosophically, we might think of this through the lens of non-attachment. The ancient Stoics and later Eastern philosophies all remind us that clinging to what no longer is causes suffering. It is the grasping the need for someone to change, to explain themselves, to admit their wrongdoing, that keeps us stuck. But when we let go with love, we free ourselves from the need for closure. We stop waiting for an apology to validate our pain. We choose peace over proof. This doesn't mean we erase our experience. It means we allow it to exist without letting it define us. You can carry the wisdom of what you've learned without dragging the weight of what went wrong. You can hold memories without clutching them. You can remember the good and release the harm. Louise Hay always spoke about sending love to those who had hurt us, not as an endorsement of their behavior, but as a declaration of our freedom. You see, the love you send isn't for them, it's for you. It's your way of stepping out of the storm and back into your center. And here's something subtle but powerful. Letting go is not always loud. It doesn't require a dramatic goodbye or a final conversation. Sometimes letting go is quiet. It's the decision to stop participating in your own pain. It's the moment you stop checking your phone. Stop rehearsing the argument. Stop waiting to be chosen. Letting go becomes real when you stop feeding the energy that once bound you. So if you are standing at the threshold, torn between love and loss, remember this. You can release someone with love and still protect your own heart. You can grieve what you hoped it would be, bless what it was, and still walk away with dignity. Because at its highest level, letting go is not about erasing the past. It's about choosing your future. And when you let go with love, you're not closing the door on someone else. You're opening the door to yourself. Once we've made the decision to let go, when we've done it not from anger, not from bitterness, but from love, the next phase begins, healing. And healing is not an instant event. It's not a switch we flip. It's a sacred process, a return to wholeness, a gentle reintroduction to the self we may have abandoned in the pursuit of being valued by someone else. But before we can truly heal, we must accept not just what happened, but the entire arc of our experience. This is where many people get stuck, not because they can't move on, but because they resist what was. They replay conversations, question their worth, blame themselves or the other person, all in a subconscious attempt to rewrite the story. But the truth is, healing doesn't come from changing the past. It comes from releasing our need to change it. Acceptance does not mean approval. It doesn't mean we condone what was hurtful or dismiss the pain we felt. Acceptance means that we stop fighting reality. We acknowledge that what happened, that this person in this chapter could not meet us in the way we hoped they would. And rather than bending ourselves backward to make it different, we stand tall and say, "This too is part of my becoming." Psychologically, this shift is transformative. The moment we stop demanding that the past behave differently, our nervous system begins to relax. Our minds become less reactive. Our emotional body becomes less inflamed, because suffering at its core is not caused just by pain. It's caused by resistance to pain. Acceptance is the balm that begins to soften that resistance. Now, this isn't passive. Acceptance is an act of profound courage. It means facing the truth without armor. It means letting go of the fantasy version of the relationship, the version we clung to, the potential we projected, the story we told ourselves late at night to justify staying. That fantasy is comforting, yes, but it's also confining, because it keeps us bound to what never truly was. Philosophically, we can look to the teachings of many wisdom traditions that remind us of impermanence. Everything changes, people grow in different directions, roles shift. And sometimes the greatest kindness we can offer ourselves is to stop demanding permanence in a world that is constantly evolving. Healing begins when we stop wishing someone had loved us better, and instead choose to love ourselves better. This is the fertile ground where forgiveness can grow, not forced, not rushed, but as a natural extension of acceptance. Forgiveness doesn't mean the wound never existed. It means it no longer controls your identity. You no longer need to carry the pain like a badge. You don't need to keep retelling the story in a way that keeps you small. You can set it down. And in doing so, you make space for a new chapter to unfold, one rooted in clarity, self-respect, and peace. Louise Hay often reminded us that the point of power is always in the present moment, that we can choose right now to stop identifying with the wound and start identifying with the healer within. And the healer does not fight the past. The healer embraces it, blesses it, and gently lets it go. So if you are in the tender space between letting go and moving on, know this: you don't have to rush. But you do have to tell the truth, and the truth is, healing begins the moment you accept that your worth was never determined by how someone else treated you. It was always yours, intact, untouched, waiting to be remembered, because the real miracle isn't that they left. The miracle is that you stayed, you survived, and now you are ready to rise. When we've walked the path of letting go with love, when we've honored ourselves through the difficult choices, grieved without bitterness, and accepted what was without resistance, we stand at the edge of something quietly powerful, a new beginning. But beginnings don't always look like fireworks. Often they come softly, disguised as empty space, the silence after the noise, the stillness after the storm. And it's in this space that many people feel lost, not because they're broken, but because they've never stood here before. They've spent so long molding themselves to fit the shape of someone else's expectations that they no longer recognize the shape of their own soul. And that's okay. In fact, that's beautiful, because this is where rebirth begins, not in the certainty of knowing who we are, but in the honest willingness to discover it. You see, new beginnings are not about rushing into the next chapter. They are about remembering that you are the author. And when you realize you have the pen in your hand again, everything changes. You stop asking, "Who will love me now?" and start asking, "What kind of life do I want to create from this place of truth?" Psychologically, stepping into a new beginning requires safety. Emotional safety, a sense that you are not betraying the past but evolving from it. Your nervous system has to learn what it means to be free, not in theory, but in practice. That means giving yourself permission to feel joy again, to explore, to dream, to play. It means trusting that life isn't punishing you. It's inviting you to return to yourself. And this return isn't loud. It might be a walk in the morning sunlight, a laugh that catches you by surprise, a project that stirs something deep in your spirit. These moments are not insignificant. They are signs that you are reconnecting with your inner aliveness. That spark, that feeling of "I am here and I am enough just as I am," is the soul stepping forward after being quiet for too long. Philosophically, new beginnings are about embracing the unknown without fear. We don't always get to know what comes next, but we can choose to meet that uncertainty not with panic, but with presence. The past may have shaped you, but it does not confine you. You are not doomed to repeat patterns. You are free to write something new, to choose relationships that feel nourishing, to build a life that feels aligned, peaceful, and honest. Louise Hay taught us that every thought we think is creating our future. So when you step into a new beginning, begin there with the thoughts you choose. Instead of replaying what was lost, affirm what is now possible. Instead of asking why it happened, ask what it's teaching you about your strength, your resilience, and your capacity to love again. You've done the hardest part. You've chosen yourself. You've grieved, you've released, you've accepted. Now, it's time to create not from fear, but from intention, not from scarcity, but from the abundance that comes with inner alignment. And I want to leave you with this. Beginnings are not clean. They're not always graceful, but they are sacred. Every time you rise from something that tried to break you, you are not starting over. You are starting from experience. You are building a life that honors your worth not because someone else sees it, but because you finally do. So take the first step, not because you know where it leads, but because you know you cannot stay where you were.